Borderlands 2 is an amazing game which has so many different ways of playing, and for the past 2 weeks I've been doing a run where I can only use SMGs, but I have also had to collect and use every single one of the unique SMGs in the game. So after spending 10 minutes with each and every one of these unique SMGs with the exact same skill tree, class mod, relic and shield, and I ranked these by how powerful they are, how hard they are to get, and how useful they are overall. And if you disagree with any of these options, please let me know what you would change in the comments below. But these are my personal top 10 SMGs in Borderlands 2, starting off at number 10, the Nirvana. And the Nirvana, while it is a pretty good gun overall, it does have one major flaw, and that is because it is an exact clone of the Hellfire, just turned rainbow, and made it extremely harder to get compared to the Hellfire. And what you need to do to get this gun is to go to the Fight for Sanctuary DLC and kill a bunch of infected badass saplings for the next couple hours probably, because this thing has a 0.9% chance of dropping from them. But apart from that, and if you don't mind farming for it, it is quite a decent fire weapon. And when used against enemies that are weak to fire, it is very good in some cases. But it is also limited because it is only fire. But with that said, it does have a very good overtime damage, which to be honest is basically useless in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, but is quite useful in normal Vault Hunter mode and True Vault Hunter mode as well. So that's why it gets its number 10 place. And we're going to move on to number 9, the Actualizer. And this Hyperion Seraph SMG is not extremely special when it comes to special effects, but it does have very high base damage and fire rate, giving you a very good amount of DPS. And multiply that with the extreme accuracy of a Hyperion SMG, I would say that it is a very good SMG overall. And while it doesn't get the bitch's 75% extra critical hit damage, it does have that base damage, which I think, to be honest, is a little bit better. And this SMG comes in every possible element, of course, except for explosive, and you can find it at the Seraph vendor in Oasis. And that is, of course, at the price of 120 Seraph crystals, which is a little bit annoying to get. But you could also possibly get it from Hyperius as a very, very rare drop from him. So overall, it's not great, but it is pretty decent. But the next weapon at number 8 is the Slagger. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking, and that is, why is the Slagger so low? And that is because while it does obviously slag anything basically in an instant, it is mostly used as a slagging source, not as a weapon itself, which kinda sucks. And yes, it does work pretty well with a B shield, and it does do decent enough damage on its own, but you don't get the extra damage from an enemy being slagged as it is a slag weapon. It also has a slightly inaccurate shooting style, but it does obviously spray bullets everywhere, so you probably won't miss your mark. And when it comes to this weapon's usefulness, I would say it would be pretty damn useful, except that nearly every single character in their action skills somewhere has something that will slag the enemies themselves. And especially since I'm using Maya, which can slag a good chunk of enemies at the same time, it's not exactly the most helpful weapon for her. But if you want to get this weapon, you can go and do the Clan War questline, going against the Hodunks and farming Tector and Jimbo Hodunk with about a 10% drop. So I would say this gun is pretty damn good, except it's not very great if you already have slag. So it definitely depends on the playstyle and the character you are using. And next we have number 7, which is the Hellfire. And that might sound pretty weird seeing as the Nirvana was at number 10. But the difference in how long it takes to get the weapon really does make a difference. And I'm pretty sure these two guns are exact clones of each other if you have the same parts. I'm pretty sure they have the exact same stats. But the reason the Hellfire makes it on this list is because, to be honest, fire is very good, especially when it comes to DLC enemies. Because the Captain Scarlet DLC, the Sir Hammerlock DLC, the Fight for Sanctuary DLC, and all of the headhunters mostly have enemies that are weak to fire, and in said situations this gun basically just melts everything. And you can get the Hellfire from Scorch after doing 2 of the cult following missions that you get from Lilith, and you find him in Frostbone Canyon, or you can find the ones in the Digistruct Peak, and they all drop at around 10%. So I would say it's pretty well deserving of its number 7 spot. And now we'll be moving on to number 6, which is the Florentine. And the Florentine is a Seraph weapon which you can only buy from the Seraph vendor from the Tiny Tina DLC, and I'm pretty sure it has no chance of dropping from any enemy whatsoever. But where this weapon does lose points on how hard it is to obtain, it does gain lots of points from its incredible damage and versatility. Because this gun is not only slag, it is also shock at the exact same time, dealing extra shock damage as the enemy gets slagged. So the best thing about this weapon is that you never have to worry about switching out to a slagger or something, or using your action skill to slag an enemy, because you can just shoot them. But where it excels in all of that, it also has a few problems with it. And the first one is that when an enemy is slagged, this gun will probably do less damage than a regular plasma caster, and because it is basically a plasma caster itself, it does take 2 ammo per shot, and it shoots in a very unique way, which I personally do not like that much. But with all that said, it still is an amazing weapon, and if you have the Seraph Crystals ready, I would definitely recommend getting this instead of the Actualizer, but that of course is dependent on your playstyle and character, and it definitely deserves its spot at number 6. And coming in at number 5, we have the Bone Shredder. And I'm probably just as surprised as you were, but when playing with this weapon, it just, well, shredded bones, and basically shredded every enemy it came up against. And this weapon, while at medium or long range, might be pretty garbage or average at best, when it is nice and close ranged, this thing is a monster. And as it is a Bandit SMG, it has very high ammo capacity and also very high fire rate, and with pretty decent damage as well. It shoots 3 projectiles at a time at the cost of 2 bullets, which isn't the best, but it's definitely not the worst. And this gun can come in any element you want, so even if you want it in slag, it basically will work like a slagger. And with a very high 33% drop chance from Bonehead 2.0 in the Arid Nexus Badlands, or from Bonehead 3.0 in the Radon Digistruct Peak, the Bone Shredder is arguably the easiest gun to farm on this list. And I would say this gun definitely beats out the rest of the guns we have listed so far, so I would say it definitely deserves its number 5 spot. But now it's time for number 4, which is the Tulane. And this might be the most controversial one on the list, but I have various reasons as to why it gets this number 4 spot. Starting off with the obvious thing, which is that it shoots both slag and shock at the same time, just like the Florentine. But where the Florentine kinda fails when it comes to a slagged enemy, seeing as the Florentine would do a bit less damage than a regular plasma caster, this is where the Tulane absolutely excels, because it starts off by shooting a regular shock projectile, then also adds onto that as soon as it hits an enemy with a 50% slag damage splash damage hit, so it does basically 50% more damage than any other Maliwan SMG of the same variety, and obviously does extra slag and shock damage at the same time as well. So it's just an insanely powerful Maliwan SMG that constantly slags and shocks any enemies it touches. And with the B shield, this thing is absolutely amazing. And I'm not too sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that the extra slag splash damage does get the amp damage as well, but I'm not too sure, just seeing as I couldn't find any sites that said anything about that at all. But there's also the obvious drawback, which is the constant slagging of the user of the weapon. And yes, I do understand why people would hate this gun, seeing as you are constantly slagged while using it, but when you're in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode and you're playing with someone like Maya, you're pretty much gone in 1 or 2 hits anyway. And if you got someone like Gage who has Death Trap taking a lot of the bullet fire, then you can work this gun pretty well with that as well. And of course there's the B shield that is basically useless when you get hit anyway, so any B shield builds would be perfect with this. But there are obviously other options that would work a little bit more than this gun. But I would still say, personally, I do think that it definitely deserves this number 4 spot, it could possibly be at number 2 if it didn't have the self-slag. And you can get this gun as a quest reward for siding with the Zaphids in the Clan War questline. But we move on to number 3, and that is the Lasco. And this weapon is basically just an all-round amazing dull SMG that has its own cool bullet pattern, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be like a bull. But anyway, now for the reason why it gets number 3 in the best SMGs in the game, and that would be because it not only shoots 2 bullets at a time for the price of only 1, and it also bursts 9 to 14 times with incredible speed. And while it has not the best bullet spread pattern, it also really just melts anything you aim at, and even if you're not aiming in, it still has a pretty decent bullet spread along with an extremely high fire rate for a dull submachine gun. And it apparently also has a chance of firing twice at 60% according to Loot Lemon, but I didn't really notice it too much, maybe because I was shooting too damn fast. Or that's what the ×2 part is for, I'm not 100% sure, but to be honest it doesn't really matter because this gun is insane. And the only drawback that I could come up with was that it doesn't come in any elements, but at the same time only coming in non-elemental also kind of works for it. And you'll find this gun in this random pond in Frostburn Canyon, just right on screen as you can see in this area. It's really not hard to find at all. And yeah, I do definitely think it deserves the number 3 spot. Possibly number 2, it was really just a 50-50 between these two. And at number 2 we have the Tatler. And this thing is pretty much the Bone Shredder but better. And while it might be a little bit annoying to get seeing as it drops from Hyperius, when it comes to this gun's actual damage output, it does much more damage than the Bone Shredder on average, and with its high magazine size, decently good fire rate, and only costing 1 ammo per 3 bullets that it shoots, this gun could be a monster when used with certain skills with certain characters, like Salvador's Keep Firing and Maya's Wreck, because when you get to fire rate speeds like that, you will be pretty much unstoppable. And not to mention the fact that it also comes in every single element possible, apart from obviously explosive. And I would say it definitely deserves its number 2 spot, or number 3, but this and the Lasco are somewhat interchangeable for me. And now for number 1, we finally have the Commerce. Now this is the most underrated gun in the game. I absolutely love how it's so shit. No, I'm joking. First we'll get into the honourable mention, which is the Bitch. And I know some people probably would have thought that this would have been higher on the list, but no. This gun gets absolutely carried by its critical hit capabilities, but when you're not hitting critical hits, you're doing nothing. And when you're on something like an Xbox or a PlayStation, and you don't have that incredible mouse and keyboard aim, it's much harder to hit those critical hit spots, especially on enemies that have such a small one. And finally, the Bitch is very hard to obtain, being only a 3.3% drop chance from the bunker or as a world drop, but you know, it's not going to be that easy to get as a world drop. And that is why it just narrowly doesn't make it into the top 10. But it does make 11th place, so close enough. And finally, in first place, we have the Bane. No, I'm just joking. It's the Sandhawk. Everybody saw this coming. It was such an obvious choice. I was even in-game trying to figure out if it has any massive flaws or anything, but I can't find anything that makes it worse than any of these other SMGs here. It's honestly just too good. And I would still maybe even put it first without the B shield, but with the B shield, this thing melts anything. I had to ban it from my SMGs only run because it was too powerful. There's an obvious reason for that, and that is why it has the number 1 spot. Coming in any element as well, it just makes it that much better. You can get it as an easy quest reward from the Captain Scarlet DLC. The only flaw that I can see with it is that when you're downed or you're not aiming in, it is basically useless. It just shoots way too slow for it to be viable without aiming in. So I would recommend not doing that, or just not using it with Gunzerker at all. And remember, if you do disagree, please let me know any changes in the comments below. I'll have a new video tomorrow being the top 10 worst SMGs, but thank you for watching.